Welcome, everybody. I am very, very excited to have Georgie Wizen-Vincent here with us today to talk about the way of play. Georgie is a nationally recognized play therapy expert and the co-author with Tina Payne Bryson of the new book, The Way of Play, which comes out in January 2025. She's also the founder and the director of the Play Strong Institute. Georgie, welcome. I'm really excited to share your brilliance with our community.
Thank you so much, Tasha. And I was just thrilled that you asked me to come back. We had worked on something together the other day, and I got to start sharing some examples of how parents can, rediscover the joy and even like get more interested in how their kids are playing and how play becomes a language for us to connect and interact and also to learn more about our kids and help them understand their behavior and sort of what drives some of that behavior too. So I know our topic underlying all of this is about when kids are getting too aggressive and we get really concerned about where that might be coming from. And so I'm going to be talking about the book and some of the concepts in it, and I want to share all that with you. But I'm also going to be keeping it within this frame of some of the behaviors that we're most concerned about. And so my focus today is really how can we use play just little moments of playing with our kids, rediscover it in a new way so that we can help our kids learn more about their emotions and get a better handle on some of their behavior together. So is it okay that I share a few slides here
Please.
as we're talking? All right, let me pull up what I got. So I've got some really bright colored slides here. Let me do my slideshow and I hope that's coming through okay. So
It's perfect.
we're talking about how play can help with behavior and build kids' emotion regulation. So that's where we're headed. And I've titled it The Way of Play, which goes along with the book that I've written with Tina Payne Bryson that I'll tell you a little bit more about in just a minute. But I want to start off with this question. If we're going to talk about play, we should really have a common definition for it. So I want you to think a little bit about when you're around the house, when you go to the park, when you're out in your neighborhood, when your kids are at school during recess, how do they like to play? What do they gravitate toward? Are they a Lego builder? Do they like to make art? Do they play with dolls in their doll house? Do they like to get messy with a lot of sensory materials? Are they like a big full body builder and they like to put forts together by grabbing all the pillows in the house? What kind of play does your kid gravitate toward? And also, how old are they and what does their development look like right now? Because some of you may have really young kids and you're concerned that your toddler or your preschooler might be a little bit more rambunctious in their body or sometimes a little impulsive, more impulsive than maybe when you look around and see other kids and how they're, acting, interacting. And then, as our kids get older, they continue to play, but their play may look a little bit different. They may be attached to more screen-based forms of play, or they may want to do more peer-to-peer play. They may want play dates and things like that. So they're really expanding the way that they're playing and, getting into things together with their friends, with their siblings, by themselves, and with you, hopefully, a little bit some of the time. So play is something kids do just because they enjoy it and it comes naturally to them. But the research shows that it also has profound benefits across lots of different domains of development. So we're going to get into that a little bit today. And I think most parents know in their heart, and they've read the blog articles and they've heard like the research and they've seen the studies that play does help kids build crucial skills, but they may not know the exact mechanisms for how that happens and that their role is really important. And so, why should parents be interested in play? Well, there's like this profound role that play plays in children's development of social emotional learning, number one. Number two, we have a really pivotal role ourselves in optimally supporting children's play. And because I'm a play therapist, I know some professionally about how to make that happen when I'm just one on one with a kid. But then we get into situations where parents are like, Georgie, stuff is happening in real time. I'm not gonna, when my kid is in the middle of a tantrum, stop and say, let's forget about this and let's just do something fun together. It doesn't mesh, it doesn't match up. So I'm really interested as a play therapist in setting kids up for maybe preventing more of those big behaviors that, baffle us and make it difficult to stay connected and we feel a little dysregulated ourselves. But I'm also interested in being able to respond in the moment. And maybe play might be the answer, or play, having a little bit of a more playful response, if it feels appropriate, might be the answer in that situation that not a lot of parents know might have been the answer. So we can use play to address some of children's needs, including some of their behavior and dysregulation, whether we're setting them up with more skills ahead of time or whether we're being more responsive in the moment, approaching them in a safe, secure way that may even have a little bit of a playful slant to it. And then we want to realize play's full potential, how to build those shorter and longer term skills kids need for success, not just now, but all the way up through adulthood. And we should keep playing even as adults. Like, it's not, we keep benefiting from it if there are aspects of your life that you really enjoy doing. Maybe you love reading, or you like going to art museums, or you like just having a day with your girlfriends where you can get out of the house and do something, that you don't normally get to do. Play becomes our form of self-care, and so we should hang on to it and keep doing it our whole lives through, whenever we can. But the reality is, for our kids, play is starting to disappear. Part of the reason that Tina Bryson, my co-author, and I wrote this book is because we want to preserve play, and we want to preserve a play-based childhood for our kids, because play is becoming a little bit, what you could say is endangered, even though we know how essential it is. So, in the push for schools to become more academic at earlier stages, and this increased emphasis in society on, screen-based games and social media, we're seeing that play is getting crowded out. And we want to make sure that kids are still getting enough time for healthy play. So, just as a little bit of background, and we cover all this in the book as well. So you can read more if you're interested when the book comes out. That play helps kids learn. It literally makes kids smarter. The discoveries that they're making in their play and the way that we approach them while they're playing can build on development and help them learn sometimes faster and more efficiently than if we leave play out of the equation. So you may be familiar with the different forms of play that we see in preschools, like with early childhood education, starting when kids are really, really little, and even before that, when they're infants and toddlers and may, just be picking things up and exploring with their hands and their bodies. They might start climbing. Play is really driving a lot of their development when they're really, really young. So if your child is older now and you think back to the things that they, were picking up or moving toward when they were just toddling around the house, you'll know that one of the first forms of play to develop is kind of what kids do when they're left to their own devices. So they're just exploring and trying things out, and they're following their curiosity, which we call child self-determined play. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the number three over here, is when they go off to school. And teachers may be using play-based activities in preschool and early elementary to sort of plan and structure how they're going to lay out a lesson or the curriculum so that they can actually learn something and feel really motivated and excited to do that learning. And then in the middle of that, we have adult-child collaborative play, which is really the sweet spot that we talk about in the book. Like, what happens when kids come up to us because they're hardwired to attach to us? That's why they keep coming up to us like, Mom, look, Dad, you got to see this. I just made this thing. Where they want us to notice what they're playing and they want to share it with us. And so we have this really important space, this really important set of moments that our kids are going to bring things to us or they want to do things with us, where if we just spent a little bit of time And if we knew a certain set of strategies, so not a lot of people teach parents and teachers and therapists how to play with kids, but and there's no one right way to play with your kid, by the way. If you're sitting there and you're like, man, okay, now you're going to teach me how to play. I needed this years ago. It's never too late to start using a couple of new tips or techniques. Even if your kid is a teenager now, you may find that some of what I'm going to talk about today is like it's never too late to start using some of these, I don't know, these little playful tips or ideas, and bringing more collaboration into your relationship with your child can really extend their thinking, can build their emotional awareness and their capacity for self-reflection, and it can help them learn more of what they need to know to head off some of the challenges that may be happening right now, or maybe just, we're just anticipating some of what may be just around the bend in your child's next stage of development. So, really talking about guided play here. That's the new buzzword for playing together with kids. Even though this is something really like natural and old and has been happening since the beginning of time, a lot of parents ask me, why are you intentionally teaching parents how to play now? And I think it's because of some of what I just said, that there's just like so much insight that we have to gain coming from, the therapy world that we can use to help give our kids, this sort of foundation we want them to have. But then also, I work with a lot of kids who are now right now, are encountering a lot of struggle around, how do I maintain my self-control? How do I communicate what I need? How do I get adults to listen? How do I manage, my body, in all the spaces that I go and not get myself in trouble? And so, we're really trying to be as responsive as we can be. And we know that play is just another tool that we can use. So if you've been doing a lot of parenting work and you know that talking to your kids, teaching them, yes, spending time together, disciplining in a calm way, all of those things that you're learning are fantastic and are all building blocks to raising healthy kids who are caring and confident and, you have close family relationships and all the things that we want, right? Play can be one more tool in that toolbox. So we don't want to ignore it or underestimate its power. So we just want to make the most of opportunities to develop our kids through play. And so what we're talking about is not something that's really expensive. I'm not going to give you like a set of toys, like you have to have all the latest, toys on a holiday guide. These are the things to go out and buy. And I'm also not saying that you have to spend hours and hours of time doing this either. We're really just talking about making the most of little moments. And so this is sort of the vehicle for delivering new skills to our kids. And because we understand the science behind play and how it builds the brain, which I'll tell you about in just a second, we know that play is incredibly motivating. It's a setting where kids can practice and learn new skills without as much pressure on them to have to sort of like perform in the moment and get it exactly right. They can try new things out, and there aren't a lot of consequences if they mess something up in play. Okay, so you knocked it over, like we'll just build it back up again, kind of thing. Here's a little bit about the book. You may know Tina Payne Bryson from her previous co-authored books with Daniel Siegel, The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline, are two books that I had next to me when my son, who's now 10, was a baby. And I think I was even reading The Whole Brain Child when I was still pregnant with him. So this is how far Tina and I go back. I had the enormous, treasured opportunity to come and work with Tina at the Center for Connection, her practice in Pasadena, where she's gathered a whole group of experts. We all work together using the same shared lens of understanding the brain and how our kids' brains are developing around the relationships and the relationship experiences that we offer them. So Tina had written all this stuff that I was incorporating into my own parenting, and then I got to work with her and create a play therapy team with her at the Play Strong Institute, this part of the CFC that we started together. And I realized how much Tina also knew about play, although she hadn't written about it yet. And I said, "Oh, eventually we should write something together," which was, like kind of a pie in the sky dream for me. She's one of my heroes in the field, and to have this all come to fruition is like a very special moment in my life. So I'm really pleased that I get to share it with you all. And Tasha, I'm very lucky that you've invited me to come and talk about it. But we call the book The Way of Play because it's another way of reaching our kids, especially when they're having really difficult and frazzled behavior, when sometimes we're, you know, knocking our head against the wall trying to figure out like, okay, what else can I try? What else can I do? Play, and we call this the play strong approach because it's really an approach. It's not just a set of, here's a set of games that you play with your kid, and if you do this every day, their behavior's gonna improve or something. It's really more of a way of approaching our kids. It's a set of strategies or ideas and perspectives for using child-led play to teach kids emotional skills and reduce some of the behavior challenges. So I really want to get into how this all works. Um, and in order to do that, I'm going to go back to the whole brain child for a second. Those of you who have read that book or seen Tina speak, you might be familiar with this idea of our kids' brains kind of like working like a house that's being built from the downstairs parts of the brain that help us survive and respond. Often we're seeing our kids' automatic responses in the moment where they might be feeling overwhelmed about something. It's the downstairs part of the brain that would be able to help them try to regulate themselves in the moment. But honestly, if you're seeing a lot of kids kind of flipping the lid and getting angry and flying off the handle about stuff way before you can get to them and help talk them through it or calm them down, then we're really seeing the downstairs brain. Just as a reminder about this concept from the whole brain child, we're seeing the downstairs brain reacting really quickly, way faster than the information of like, what is actually happening here and how can I respond in a really thoughtful, planned out, calm way. It takes a lot longer for that information to get up to the upstairs brain where kids could, decide how they want to react instead of just reacting. So that's really what we're aiming to get at when we talk about play, because play comes from the downstairs to the upstairs too. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but a neuroscientist called Jaak Panksepp told us that if you disable the upstairs brain, which is what happens when our kids get angry, by the way, the upstairs brain shuts down temporarily, and it's the downstairs brain that's really driving the car in that moment. If your kid is upset or angry or their behavior is looking frazzled and stuff, the downstairs brain's kind of in charge. And that's what happens in the moment that a kid sees a really cool, like, toy in their room they haven't played with for a while. They see it and they're like, I want to do something with that. Or they see a cardboard box. What you see your kid's face light up when they get this idea of like, oh, you just bought this new appliance and we've got this huge cardboard box. What can I do with it? Right? That stimulus comes from the downstairs brain just as much as their anger and the chaos can come from the downstairs brain too. So we've got a really cool part of the brain at work here, working on them. And so if we can harness the same impulse that's coming up that would make them angry and reactive, and the same impulse may come from those parts of the brain that would help them be able to figure out like what's an idea or how can I harness what's happening through the play instinct or the play pathway. then we want to try and do that. And we want to make use of all the tools available to us, right? So that's why I got to tell you about this. So we make 3 points in the book. And the first one is that we know a lot more than we used to about how natural play is for children, that neuroscientists have told us like play is an evolutionarily old pathway in the brain. Animals in nature, they play, but they play to learn how to survive situations, how to find food, how to protect themselves from predators and things like that. Our kids play just as instinctually and just as naturally. And it becomes the language that develops before they learn how to talk. So before they can talk about problems, they can play out. They play out their emotions and they play out their lives in the things that they're trying to do when they're not really thinking about it. The point number 2 we make in the book is that we can use play to reduce unwanted behavior, not by playing with them more, but by approaching their play differently and utilizing it as, a place to build skills. And the third point is that play gives kids appropriate ways to deal with emotions. They can play, often they can play when they can't say, or we say in the book the the thing about kids is when they can't say it, often they can play it. So we see kids playing out their emotions or acting out emotions in ways that we could utilize as sort of a rehearsal for the big event, the real moments in life where they're going to need to learn how to harness the powers of the upstairs brain and calm themselves down from the top down, eventually learn how to emotionally regulate. And we do this through relationships. Relationships and our experiences together in relationship light up that brain, help them build synaptic connections so they'll actually remember the skills that we have to teach. This starts when they're really young, but as I said, the brain is a plastic organ. We can keep building it even as they grow. And what we've noticed when we've used these play strong strategies with parents, we did a study during the pandemic when everybody was stuck at home during lockdown. We taught a group of parents how to play with their kids using, these 7 tips, really. And parents went away and tried it with their kids. And what they found was their minds opened. They became more responsive to the other parenting techniques they were already using. Kids started listening more. Kids started becoming more cooperative. It was kind of, I mean, it's a little bit like magic, and it's not something that you can just play once and then it starts happening. Parents had to give their kids repeated repetition, like they had to do it a little bit every day. But over time, what they noticed was kids were really learning from this and they were becoming more responsive. Parents could be more mindful in their discipline because everybody was a little calmer and in a better mood. And also, they were calmer and in a better mood with their siblings too. So we noticed that there was a noticeable difference in the number of sibling squabbles going on at home. And remember, this is during the pandemic. Like, we can't go anywhere. You're all locked down. You would think there'd be more fighting. You'd think there'd be more arguments. You think there'd be more tearing each other's hair. But actually, we found that it was creating a more peaceful home life. So, without belaboring the point anymore, because I want to get into talking about some of the ways that these parents, some of the things that they were learning, is it's just another set of steps that you can use. I just want you to think of it as something you can add in, or if you're stuck and you're like in the moment, and you're like, what the heck am I going to do right now? Because I've tried everything. Then you were really tapping into children's first language of play. It's an old evolutionary language that we can then use as a second language for reaching our kids when they really feel like it's hard, when it feels like they're really hard to reach. And I just want you to know that this kind of play builds the brain. So these play interactions, these really simple little things that we can do, they help kids regulate their bodies and their emotions. It helps them make better decisions, builds in more impulse control, empathy, flexibility, insight. They can overcome more challenges and build more resilience. It grows their executive functions. This all ties into one part of the brain called the middle prefrontal area, which is closer to the upstairs brain than the downstairs brain. But it's all connected when it comes to this part of the brain, like the very front, right here, as actually the part of the section of the brain that connects all the parts of the brain together. So it's a very integrative part that we're working toward building in. And not only are we building, those lower to higher brain functions in, but we're also finding that kids are able to grow in their character and their ability to make wise, more patient decisions that speak to who they are as people, morality, and using good judgment with others. So it's not just to build their own self awareness, but their awareness of other people and what's meaningful in the long run in their lives. And it also gives you another, what's the word? Like you get to dive in and get to know your kids in a whole new way. Like what makes them tick and what's going on underneath the hood. Play can be another way of discovering them, finding out like more of what's going on in there. I find that with my own kid anyway. If he's had a hard day at school and he comes home and he's just like in a snuff, then often just playing together for a couple of minutes can open things up. And I might even see themes of what he's struggling with coming up in his play. And I've seen that with other kids, and parents have told us now that we start to play together in this way, and it only takes a couple of minutes for kids to start opening up more, that can head off more problems that day, that week, and so on and so on. So, looking at the first strategy, so I really want to get into strategy right now. And I just want to set myself up a little bit so that I know, how much time I have to keep talking about this.
We have about another 30 minutes
30
together.
minutes, great. We've got
Yeah.
loads of time to really get into some of these specific ideas. So, the first strategy that I want you to just think a little bit about is what's happening when your kid goes to grab something that they'll want to do, when they'll want to play with. And I made the point that this doesn't involve buying new, more expensive toys. It doesn't involve setting aside hours and hours of time, but it does involve paying attention, or noticing when your child is saying, "Hey, do you want to come and see this? Do you want to do this thing with me?" So we're just kind of using that as a starting point, right? We know that some sparks are going off when they, let's see, say, notice that, oh, I kind of feel like doing some Legos, or I want to grab some blocks, magnetiles, and I want to build with those. So we're really thinking about that little spark that you might be seeing of ideas forming in their mind of what they want to do. This is a really key moment when you just kind of settle in with them. So the idea is for you to come up and just be alongside them, sit down at the table with them, or, some parents hate to get down on the floor, and make the sounds of the cars and stuff like that. I'm not saying that you have to do that. It's just about finding a little time together with your kid. And then the other thing is maybe it's not that you enjoy doing the pretend play stuff. You don't want to get into like, do I have to like pretend to be an NFL player, or I have to like stand up with a microphone and like pretend to belt out like a pop star or something. I don't want to do the pretend stuff. Is Georgie saying that I have to do that? You don't have to do that. That is a really cool way to use some of the play strong strategies. But if that's not your thing, no one's going to hold your hand to the fire and force you to do it. What's most important to me and to Tina is that you do things that are mutually enjoyable between the two of you, or with you and your other kids together. You can do all of this as a family. It doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, I've got 4 kids. How am I going to make time with just one of them at a time? Do it together as a family and do things that you like to do together. So that could not even look like pretend play. That could be like cooking together, or singing to the radio in the car, or, you know, making a garden, or just heading to the park with a frisbee or something. It's whatever you normally do on a daily basis. We're just infusing play in a different way, the way of play. So when we use a strategy like Think Out Loud, this is really an opportunity to build kids' awareness. So this is a kind of a preventative play technique. It's something we do ahead of time that lays the groundwork for more complex and mature skills. And I'm going to tell you exactly why we do this and where it's headed for your kids. But it's really big. It's the most fundamental, but in my mind, the most important. And so we start off with this. We really want kids to become more aware of themselves. When a young child is just puttering around, figuring out what they want to do when they play, and really no matter what they're doing, they don't really know that they have thoughts and feelings. It takes them a long time for them to learn what a thought is or what a feeling is. And so before they have an awareness of what they think and feel, kids are having these experiences anyway. And when we join with them in their play, just for a little bit, then we can give them the message in the way that we respond to what they're doing that someone understands me and I can understand myself. So I use some of the illustrations from the book. Look, so we try to make it as easy as we can, y'all. You're not going to get a bunch of stuff that sounds super academic in this book. It's really like you don't want to read the whole thing. Don't read the whole thing. Just grab little bits and pieces. Who has the time, right? And we also have really cute pictures and illustrations, kind of make it really easy to just start diving in. You might even recognize some of these scenarios that you've spent this time with your kids, and you know what that's like. And some of it you might even already be doing it right. So give yourselves a huge pat on the back if you recognize yourself doing some of these things already, because you're right aligned with the research on this stuff. You have a good instinct for play. But looking at this illustration, all we're really talking about here is trying to guess and come up with a hypothesis of what your kid is doing while they're playing and then speaking those thoughts out loud. They need to hear us say what it is that we think they're doing and give them an opportunity to tell us when they're just engaged in their own free play. It's just their child-led interest going here. Like, let's speak their ideas out loud so that they can hear not only that we're interested in what they're doing, because that's part of our bonding, that's part of our connection, but they also need to hear a lot adults reflecting with them to learn how to self-reflect themselves. So yes, you can do that. You can encourage kids to self-reflect when they're just struggling with homework and you're like, it seems like, you would really like to be better at math, but you're not quite sure how to get there or something. Or when they raise a fist and they look like they're going to, threaten their sibling or something like that, because we're talking about aggression and play today as well. And you're like, I know you feel like, punching, but let's think of another way, right? Like, I need you to calm down right now. That's self-reflection. So all we're really talking about is being able to do that a little bit more when kids are in that space where they're not in the heat of the moment. We're building up their capacity so that they're a little bit more ready to already have these wired in, these ways of being wired in so that we can head off more of the problems down the road. So I just want to tell a little story that I was working with a boy of about 5 years old. He was young and he had a 2-year-old sister. He loved building with blocks, very much like the picture that we just saw. He'd come and build with blocks. He'd have like a few big square blocks and then he'd have a big triangle block and they'd put cars on top. And when that car is going up on the top of this structure and then you've got like this decline coming down, that he was building probably a ramp. But his sister would come in the room and over again, and you might see this just the same patterns with siblings over and over again. He wants to build, she's two, she's going to take that block that he's using, right? And a lot of that speaks to where they were developmentally at the time. But if you're noticing that your kids are just in these same habitual patterns over and over again, a strategy like thinking out loud when you're with them, you can do it when they're together, or you can do it when you've got your kids separately. It really sets them up to get more practice at being able to do this, to be able to use their words instead of reacting so angrily and off the cuff and even hurting each other. And so, what I would do when I was with this kid, I'll call him Theo, and we tell the story in the book too. Um, I would say, Theo, it looks like you're building a ramp. And he was like, yes. How did you know that? You're reading my mind. He was like amazed that someone as old as me could guess what he was playing. So when our kids are little, they really are like sponges and they sponge all of this up. But older kids are doing this too. They're sponging what we have to offer, what we say while they play. And so being able to think our thoughts out loud then becomes a shared language for them. It lays down new pathways so that they begin to use their words more instead of letting those reactions take over so quickly. So we practiced a lot with Theo, and he would start to use his words to describe, I'm building this, and I want to make this next, and I'm going to do a landing pad so that the car doesn't crash, and I'm going to make a garage so the car can go and park. And soon he was solving problems in his play, and pretty soon he was ready for his sister to come in, and he knew exactly what she was going to do because he learned how to predict. Like, this is what a person's motivation is. And I can see that she wants to come in and she's probably going to take the ramp away. So when she came in the next time, he thought out loud, he used his words, and he said, Emma, don't take this part. I'm building a ramp. Okay? Okay, Emma? And it was almost as if what we were doing here in this picture from the whole brain child is we were helping, using Think Out Loud, we were helping these two parts of the brain, the reactive and the responsive, communicate more efficiently with each other so that Theo could stay calm and he could express himself to his sister in a way that didn't involve basically trying to strangle her, because that's what it would erupt into over and over again. And so he was more able to do that himself. So we think out loud with our kids. They're more able to think out loud with us, with their siblings, with their friends at school, their teachers, everywhere that they go. This builds in that skill for them. So the steps are really just simple. It's not rocket science. It's just listen and observe and then hypothesize about what your kid is doing and then say it out loud. Very, very simple steps. And if you get it wrong, don't worry because they will correct you. They will tell you it's not a ramp, it's a slide. See, I'm putting a person on top. It's not a car. Come on. Come on, mom. That's what my son says anyway, because I still get it wrong, even as a play therapist. And you might have a kid that's, I have a neurodivergent kid. So I have a kid that has some developmental differences. He's got some sensory processing things, and he had a speech delay when he was young, and that affects his learning. He has a learning difference now. And so Think Out Loud can sometimes still be hard for him, but we're still working on it. And, there are just moments where I'm going to get it wrong. And he's like, listen, mummy, because he's half British. So he calls me mummy. His dad is from England. He'll say, mummy, can you not guess what it is that I'm doing? Can you just tell me like, oh, you're building something? It's like he's now coaching me now that he's 10 on how he wants me to think out loud, which is beautiful that he has that kind of conscious awareness and that he's able to express that in an empathic way instead of saying, man, you're really dumb, aren't you? You couldn't tell what I was doing. But we also want our kids to be able to learn that, I don't know, to have manners and how they say things and to be sensitive to the thoughts and the ideas of other people too. So Think Out Loud can also help them help them build that. So, what does this do for our kids? Just as a review, um, when you as a parent play with your kid and narrate what you see, then your kid knows that you enjoy being with them. And for your kid, it becomes more possible to observe what you're thinking and to also know what someone else might be thinking, like Theo and his sister Emma. He knows what she's going to do. He can plan and predict and use his upstairs brain to be able to slow himself down and go, if I just tell her what my plan is, then maybe my dad can help me get her to do something else besides take that block that was my ramp away. So Theo or your kid can understand that they can choose how they respond to their own thoughts and feelings with some repetition, but practicing in play helps gear them up, as I said, for the big events and can prevent some of those problems. What thinking out loud does for us is that it helps remind us that behavior is communication. So, what we might see is that our kid angrily grabs something or throws something, or is really, really mad at us. And they do things that are sort of, they're not being rational. But it gives us a moment. When you think out loud, you kind of have to work in that reflective pause. And so it helps us to pause and think about what's actually going on here. Because as our kids are developing, they need us to help them build the skills that will then head off these problems in the future. So, what skill could I build in my kid, especially when they're calm and just enjoying themselves in play, a chance to practice, that gives us a chance to reflect and pause together, or for you as a parent, just to be able to pause to reflect. So when we're thinking about aggressive behavior, we're thinking about our kids who get mad, they, scream, they're having a big tantrum, they're throwing stuff. These are really scary times. And it can make us really worried about where they're headed in the future. But if we can utilize more reflection for ourselves, whether that's in the moment or before and after these things happen. I once had a teacher who told me it's all about reflection. You can reflect before and during and after something is going down with your child, and you should reflect before and during and after. But often it's the hardest to reflect while it's happening because we're dysregulated too in those moments. And so we might be reacting more from the downstairs brain than the upstairs brain. So reflecting before and after can sometimes become the most important times for us to reflect. So with my own kid, who was quite aggressive when he was young because he had a speech delay where he couldn't use his words and think out loud very, very easily. And he still has those challenging times. I have to think to myself, if he's being aggressive, you know, is he having emotions? What are those emotions, right? Is there a way that I can connect with those emotions so that we can bypass some of the aggression? Does he have a physical need? Is he tired or hungry or, had a bad day or whatever? What is he coming home with? Is he not in control of his body right now because of some of his sensory differences? Is he overstimulated? Is the aggressive thing that he's doing a strange, weird attempt to connect and be close with me? I don't know if anybody has that, but I know he really wants a hug, but he's pushing me, like he's pushing me against a wall or something, or he's squeezing me too hard. And I'm like, I think this is your boy way of trying to be close. And for whatever reason, it's hard for you to modulate that or to just express that in a way that I can understand. By the way, I'm not great at knowing this in the moment. The reflecting during the behavior is the hardest, right? So, before and after, and then getting better at reflecting during is kind of what we're all working on. And it's still a work in progress. And then are they being aggressive because they don't know what else to do, that they haven't built that skill yet? So we have to break it down between bottom up. I'm doing this. I mean, bottom up behavior versus top down thinking and rationality. Okay. So knowing that a lot of times the aggression is coming from a bottom up place, it's coming from the body. It's my kid doesn't realize that they haven't eaten in 5 hours, but they're saying they're not hungry. And, there's this interoceptive process where they're just refusing food, but I'm trying to get you to eat and you won't eat anything. Then anything that we're seeing happening is probably coming from a bottom up place at that moment, right? Got to find some way of getting you to eat a snack as fast as possible. Whereas a top down behavior is one that's more under, I'm going to say conscious control, but more and more I'm realizing that kids aren't usually, if they're being aggressive, they aren't usually in a top down state. They're not in a state where they can do the reflective pause, where they can think about solutions and engage their logic and be able to work things out with us very readily. And the aggression is just a result of that, right? So it helps us to know where some of this is coming from because then I know what kind of play is needed or how I can approach using play in case my kid needs to learn more skills. So whether we're talking about being able to respond in the moment or being able to build ahead of time, and be prepared ahead of time, we can help kids learn new emotional abilities in their play. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. Ultimately, we want them to learn all the skills of emotion regulation that they can control, recognize, manage, and express their feeling states effectively, especially the big ones. So, you know, I've got a little bit more time with you. Let's say that you're seeing aggression that's coming from the bottom up, right? Let's say that you're seeing a kid who, they're just, I don't know, they're having a moment and they decide, you know what, I'm just gonna hit the top of the table over and over again. I'm gonna, just bang and make a lot of noise. And I know that that means something, but I might not exactly know what that means right then and there in that moment. But I also know as a parent, if I come in and tell them to stop, if I just say, hey, that's enough, like, can you knock that off, please? Then what's really happening is I'm coming at a bottom up behavior that they don't understand and I don't understand with a top down solution. And that's like oil and water. That's probably not going to go very far with my kid if it's a bottom up behavior. So, what we can do is use another strategy that we talk about, dial intensity up or down. And in this case, my kid's having an intense moment or behavior that I want to slowly, gradually dial down instead of coming at him with a big stop sign. What we understand about the brain and when things are bubbling up from the bottom is that if we try and come down from the top and squelch the behavior down, it bubbles back harder. It's going to come back. It's going to swing back up against us. Whether that looks like out and out oppositionality and I'm going to rebel against what you're saying, or it's more of an argument and they're going to pick more of a fight, or they're going to wait until your back is turned and they're going to do it. That bottom up need that's emerging in that moment needs to get expressed somehow. So we got to match that with a bottom up solution. Otherwise, it's going to keep growing. It's going to get bigger and it's going to overwhelm both of us. So, with a strategy like this, I just invite you to think about, where is your kid at on their regulation thermometer? I love this image because it helps me. I just imagine this in the moment. And I'm like, is my kid, if this was a big thermostat on the wall and my kid's somewhere on this thermometer, are they in the just right zone? Obviously, if my kid is like banging on a table over and over again, and I'm telling myself, just trying to get my attention, I'm going to put a stop to this, then it may be that this kid in this moment is in the high intensity zone down on the bottom right hand of this thermometer. And if I come at him with high intensity myself, we're both going to boil over. Or is my kid on the lower intensity zone? Maybe I've just said, hey, it's time to open your math book and start doing your math homework. And they do one of these floppy bodies on the chair and they're like, oh, I hate school. Why do I have to do all this homework? And you just know that it's like they're melting down, but in a really slow, low intensity way. Then they're at the other end of this thermometer and they're just like, I couldn't care less. I don't have the motivation to do what you're telling me to do. So what we're talking about is really helping them move gradually back into that just right regulated part of the this zone so that they can engage and start using their minds in a helpful way, a cooperative way. We want to get them back online in their regulated space. Intensity can be too high or too low. You know, how frequently do we see scenes like this in our own families, in our own family lives? It's too high when we see any of these factors. Kids are moving too fast, they're being too loud or too rough, excessively silly, they're trying to eat things they're not supposed to, putting Play-Doh in their mouth or something. It seems like maybe it could be like a top-down intentional behavior, but it probably isn't. They're overstimulated. They're expressing big feelings that are out of sync with the other people around them. This is too high intensity. Whereas too low in their intensity might be like what I described with not wanting to get the homework started, pouting, refusing to do the thing, refusing to even play, can't get them motivated. They seem sad or low energy, understimulated. They might be shutting down. That's a common sign of their intensity is too low. I want to talk about the too high intensity because we're talking about aggression. Instead of coming at them with this big, hey, that's enough, you know, knock it off. We have other ways of approaching something that might be a little too aggressive, but it's not hurting anyone. So I use the metaphor of like a sword fight, like a play sword fight, to think about when your kid's coming at you too hard or when they're using too much of their strength or their force. So think about just dialing down the intensity instead of putting this big stop to it right away and sort of going, "Oh, you know, you're banging on the table. You got a lot of energy in your arms and you want to have them decrease the force, right? So I might say something like, you can't really bang on the table, but if you wanted to hit the sofa as hard as you want, you know, and this sounds like really simple stuff, everybody. But if this can avoid a moment where you're going to get into a power struggle with your kid because you've offered them an alternative, like if they're hitting a pillow or the sofa instead of hitting the top of the table, then you've saved your table, but you've also saved yourself a power struggle, right? So really simple stuff, but dial the intensity by changing where they're doing this, for example. You can also lower the physical effects of what's happening. So you could say, or the emotional effects of what's happening. You could say something like, oh, we could, you know, create a drum kit out of cardboard right now. Or I can put these plastic trash cans out for you if you really feel like banging. Let's do it that way. Would that be cool with you? So you're just adjusting, you're just imagining adjusting the dial in that way. And the other thing, if all else fails, this is a play therapist trick of the trade, is to infuse with story and storytelling. So you could say something like, you, I know you've been asking for those drumming lessons. You know, if you were a drummer right now, what kind of beat would you make up here? Maybe not on the table. Maybe we could do that over here on the, you know, on your drums or your toys you've got over here. Something like that. Where you're guiding their attention away from the thing you don't want them to do, but you're joining with them and you're adding a little bit of a story. Now let's use pretend to imagine that you're a drummer. And in doing so, you can help, sorry, you can help build in, this is actually building emotion regulation, everybody. Because instead of engaging in a struggle with your kid, you're leading them down a play pathway that will then help them learn to adjust their own dial a little bit more readily. So they begin to understand banging on the table is not, or hitting my sister or whatever that might be, is not the appropriate behavior right now. But how could I do this? Or is there another way? And I become more aware of what's going on in my body if my caregiver, if my parent is saying something like, you've got a lot of strength in your arms at the moment. So you're really calling attention to what might be going on in their sensory body or their sensory systems that might be leading to that happening, especially if you're noticing that their sensory intensity, like I said, I have a kid who has sensory differences. So if it's my sensory filtering is not matching the situation that I'm currently in, and that's why I look aggressive, then this can be another way of approaching our kids in these moments that can just change the whole atmosphere. And then we have to, we have to stop and take a look at ourselves like, where am I on that dial? Am I going to be able to bring them back into the just right zone? And then having our own regulation tools ourselves then becomes important. Where am I right now? Am I too high, too low? Can I get myself in the just right zone so that I can meet them and bring them back there? Because if I'm too dysregulated, whether it's too high or too low, it's going to be really hard for me to bring them gradually where I want them to be. And, you know, basically we're just trying to avoid that big, massive stop right there. And then I'll start wrapping up, uh, Tasha, if I'm at that point. You got to
Yeah, I
keep
think
me
this
on
would be a
time.
great time to
Okay,
wrap up, let people know where they can get your book, that kind of thing.
great.
I know there are other what do you call them? Uh what do you call them, rules? No,
Strategies.
strategies.
Yeah,
Sorry.
just
There are other
ideas.
strategies, but we might have to buy your book to learn them just in the
Yes.
interest of time.
Yeah, yeah. I was also thinking about if I had had extra time, I would have also mentioned that sometimes we just have to set a limit, you know, and we actually have another strategy for when you just can't let something like that continue and it's really hard to redirect them to something that's a little bit more sort of in an appropriate range of what's acceptable in your house and your family. And sometimes, if you've got two siblings who are kicking off with one another or your kid is getting too aggressive with you, there's more in the book around how to respond in those moments. And because there has to be structure even in play, right? We can't let our kids do whatever they want because they're not really learning that skill of self-discipline either, or self-control or emotion regulation. So this is where we can bring in a limit setting strategy and really help guide them into another lane because sometimes they can be like race cars that get way beyond what we can allow. So I just wanted to mention that in the book, we have strategies around that too. If you're like, hang on a minute, Georgie, sometimes it's not just about banging on a table, which I totally understand. Wrapping up, I just want to share that play is a powerful tool that not as many parents know about. I certainly feel grateful that I've had good teachers who have helped me to understand how play can be regulating for our kids. Play can help us pivot them out of difficult moments. Play can help us avoid power struggles. And play can, in fact, give them crucial skills to avoid things more extreme behavior like aggression that we don't want to see. But it takes time and it takes a little bit of practice and repetition together. It's not something where you can play for 2 minutes and then all of a sudden your kid is like the perfect child. But that doesn't exist anyway. and neither does perfect parenting exist. So the idea is that we're just working on it together, but we're finding more and more connection out of these little moments, and just playing all by itself is strengthening the muscles of the things that we want to see in our kids. We want to see more in our kids and building their character. And ultimately, if you decide you like the sound of some of this and you'd really like to check out more in the book, then what we say as an overarching idea is that play doesn't become just what you do. It is a way of being after you've been doing this for a little while with your kid. And you can take it on as much or as little as you want to, and at any point in raising your child. So I'm, I think I'll wrap it up there and turn it back over to you, Tasha. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to put up the slide again about the book, where to get the book, or at least tell us, maybe just tell us
Yes.
where, if people want to get the book, where can they get it?
Yes, I'll put up the slide one more time. Let me just back all the way up to it. So at this moment in time, while we're recording this, the book is available for pre-order, and you can find that at tinabryson.com or at playstronginstitute.com. There's also a QR code if you're still catching it during the pre-order phase. You can just scan this real quick and you can find it there. After January 21st, which is the release date for the book, you'll be able to find it on Penguin Random House's website or anywhere that you typically find books. It's also going to be available on audiobook, so you can grab links to order the book if it's now in past its release date, which we're very excited that that's coming up quick.
Yes. Well, I'm very excited that you wrote this book. I want to thank you so much for coming and for sharing your brilliance with us. I, as a parent coach, support thousands of parents, and I'm always looking for resources on play. I have very few that I feel good about. There's a few good ones, but I'm excited to read this and to add this to my list of books that I get to recommend to parents that are really practical. I love that
Mm,
you said earlier, we're not going to give you a bunch of academic uh, sort of, research studies and things
yeah,
that you need to interpret. Like these are, I think we understood from the two strategies that you went into with us today. These are really practical strategies that we can use day in and day out. And like everything that I teach, it's just a way of being, right? I mean, and who doesn't want to infuse play into their day in and day out way of being with their kid? I
yeah,
do.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think we all do, but we sometimes get stuck on how to do it,
Yes.
as I said,
Yeah.
because no one's ever really taught us that part of parenting. It'd be nice to know.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So thank you very much, and best of luck with your book.
Thank you. Thank you, Tasha. And thanks all of you that were here today. Take care.
Yeah.